first of all, welcome back, and welcome to Season 4 of Trans Truth. Yes, we have been radio silent for some time. Actually, since Episode 37, our remote studio show recorded at Katy Pride back in October. I couldn't get anyone to write me a note to excuse our tardiness, but we will, in this and upcoming episodes, provide some explanation. But for now, let's get to those news stories. On Friday, March 20th, the AP reported that a federal judge said the government overreached by issuing a declaration that called treatments like puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgeries unsafe and ineffective for young people experiencing gender dysphoria. This according to a ruling Thursday in a federal court in Oregon. This was a summary judgment and will be followed shortly by a formal written decision stating that Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. didn't go through the proper administrative procedures in December when issuing the declaration which warned doctors they could be excluded from federal health programs like Medicare and Medicaid if they provide these treatments. While this is a significant win for transgender people in the United States, there are many more battles yet to be fought, and we'll be talking more about the casualties of those fights later in this episode. In a post on their Facebook page, Katy Pride reports that a federal judge has issued a preliminary injunction blocking the enforcement of key aspects of Texas Senate Bill 12 in Houston Independent School District, Katy ISD, and Plano ISD. Senate Bill 12 is a little like your typical don't say gay bills, but this one is more of a don't say anything that makes conservatives uncomfortable bill. The law would apply to all public and charter schools in the state for every grade from pre-K through grade 12. The law would ban outright events celebrating Black, Latino, Asian, and Indigenous history, trainings on cultural awareness and inclusion, critical conversations between students, parents, and educators about topics relating to race, gender identity, and sexual orientation, school-sponsored activities and field trips relating to race, gender identity, or sexual orientation. The lawsuit was brought by the American Civil Liberties Union of Texas, the Transgender Law Center, and the law firm Baker McKenzie on behalf of multiple groups and individuals. My friends, this is huge. Again, it may only be a preliminary injunction, but it shows that even in the reddest states, like Texas, justice is still possible. Rest assured that we will be following this story closely. Meanwhile, we would like to renew our plea for all our listeners to support the ACLU and or the Transgender Law Center. Links will be in the episode notes for this episode. And this just in, 2 days ago, a federal court has ruled that Senate Bill 12 prohibitions on sexually oriented performances in public spaces can go into effect. The ongoing arguments and pearl clutching about what constitutes sexually oriented will be entertaining, if nothing else. I mean, to Moms for Liberty, Drag Story Hour is sexually oriented. My God, what it must be like to be so tortured by your twisted sense of morality. And speaking of twisted, Michigan Advance reports that the Food and Drug Administration is planning to crack down on companies that sell chest binders. Binding is, of course, one of the most common first steps taken by trans men and boys to explore their gender identity. Compared to the DIY methods employed in the past, these devices are more comfortable and, relatively speaking, far safer. Again, we see a pattern of Republican officials acting to ban things that reduce some of the suffering of those with gender dysphoria. North Country Public Radio has a story on retired 4-star General Stanley McChrystal presiding at a retirement ceremony for 5 distinguished transgender service members. Such a ceremony would normally be held at the Pentagon, but had to be hosted by the Human Rights Campaign in Washington, D.C. I'm sure that I needn't go into the reasons for that. The article is a bit of a long read, but there's an audio link, and I urge everyone to read or listen to it in its entirety because everyone needs to understand to fully appreciate what a monumental waste of resources you-know-who's transgender ban represents. It costs, on average, $100,000 to train a soldier through basic training and advanced individual training, or AIT, where he or she will have gained the skills and knowledge required to be at least minimally effective in their MOS, or military occupational specialty. In the case of some specialties, that cost is in millions. And the years of experience that senior service members have simply cannot be bought at any price. General McChrystal clearly knows this.
God forbid if we're in a major war and we need to start calling everybody up, I would hope that we would not suddenly say we are only going to draft people of a certain type because we wouldn't have enough.
And finally, NBC Palm Springs has provided a story about pioneering trans woman Hannah Noakes. Born in Loudoun County, Virginia in 1898, Noakes lived openly as a woman for many years before notoriety was thrust upon her. In 1933, Noakes was thrust into the national spotlight when she was called to testify in a double murder trial of one George Crawford, who had once stayed in the boarding house that Miss Noakes operated. The trial was already in that spotlight because Crawford was defended by an all-black legal team led by Charles Houston, a famous civil rights attorney. Predictably, the newspaper accounts of Hannah's testimony made a big deal about her gender identity, many going so far as to print insults such as red-wigged boy-girl or a girlfriend fairy. A particular note, though, was the exchange between Houston and Noakes' nephew. When he was asked if Noakes was his aunt or his uncle, the lad replied, "Aunt." Houston asked again, and again the answer was, "Aunt." 1933. A trans woman who was, by most accounts, completely accepted as a woman in her community. That's pretty cool. Oh, and by the way, we're going to feature Hannah Noakes' story in an upcoming episode about ambassadorship as activism, because that lady is an absolutely prime example of how that works. Once again, welcome back to the Trans Truth Podcast. I am your host, Kelly Nelson. Jerry Ann could not be with us for this episode, but she promises to be back with us soon. So let's jump right in and talk about where the hell we've been for almost 5 months. Shortly after our last episode of Season 3, I began a series of moves that took me from Sugar Land to Texas City and finally to Seattle, here in my native home state of Washington. I thought that I had packed at least a minimal set of gear with which to handle Season 4, and I almost did. Digital recorder? Check. Microphone? Check. Headphones? Check. Microphone cables? Damn. So between dragging that U-Haul up here and unpacking and trying to organize my tiny apartment, it's more of a walk-in closet with an ensuite, and all the other stuff an old lady needs when moving across the country, I've been spread a little thin. But let me tell you that it's good to be here. Just how good, maybe I can illustrate with a couple of stories. As I was driving the last leg of my 4-day drive, I realized that I had forgotten to pack my hand truck to help in the unloading. So I stopped at a Harbor Freight store in Tumwater, Washington, just south of Olympia. Now, if you've ever shopped at Harbor Freight, you know the drill at checkout. "Can I have your phone number, please?" asked the clerk. Harbor Freight is big on keeping track of who buys what and where and when they buy it. I give the guy my number, he types it in, then does kind of a double take at the screen, then turns to me, eyes narrowed, and asks, "Dead name?" "Oh, crap," I think. Here we go. "Yes, that's me," I say. Then he smiles, leans toward me just a bit, and asks softly, "Would you like me to change that name for you?" You could have knocked me over with a feather. I was so not expecting that. Finally, I squeak out, "Yes, please, it's Kelly." He starts typing the correction and then tells me, "Yeah, I remember when my daughter asked to change her name. Back in my home state, less than 3 hours, and I've already encountered an angel." So about a week later, I'm at the driver license office to get my Washington license. They call my number, and the young man at the window asks, "How can I help you?" I hand him my Texas driver's license and tell him that I've moved back after many years away. He then asks if I had a Washington driver's license in the past. I answer in the affirmative. He types some more on the computer thingy, then looks up at me and asks, "Did you ever live in such and such?" referring to the town where I first got my driver's license a few years ago. Okay, several few years ago. Y'all never mind how many, and get off my lawn. Anyway, he smiles and says, "Welcome home." More typing, and then he looks at me through narrowed eyes and says, "I guess you'll be wanting me to change that gender marker, yes?" Again, totally not ready for that question at this point in my paperwork journey. And now he's wearing a big, shit-eating grin. This young man has probably done this dance before and is rather enjoying himself. I finally managed to stammer out, "Yes, please." And he's ready for me. "To what?" he sweetly asks, his grin even bigger. Again, I am so taken back by such consideration, coming completely unbidden, that I still can't speak. Finally, the cheeky lad says, "Your choices are M, F, or X." Finally tumbling to the fact that he's working a bit, I chuckle and say, "F, please." And that is as remarkable an interaction as I have had since arriving here. I got to tell you, it's all a bit disorienting. No double takes from the desk clerk at my new doctor's office, or from the checkout clerk at the supermarket. No scowls from some MAGA guy at the next table in a restaurant. Okay, granted, I live in Seattle's Capitol Hill. It's like Houston's Montrose neighborhood on steroids, only they still have those rainbow crosswalks all over the place. The place is lousy with young hipsters, and you almost can't swing a dead cat without hitting a trans woman, but still, I don't know. It's going to take some getting used to. Oh, and it seems I am a bit out of uniform. Oh, I've got my ragwool socks, my insulated parka, and cozy fleece-lined beanie, but I am just not quite ready for pink, blue, or purple hair. Oh, and did I mention that the local pro football team won some big game a few weeks ago?
Wow!
So here I am in Seattle. One of the things I had planned to do soon after moving in was to reach out to the local trans community to see if there was any way I could be of service. My second evening here, I sat in on a virtual peer support meeting held weekly by the Ingersoll Gender Center. During the introductions portion of the meeting, someone introduced herself as someone working with a local organization that provides support to a handful of transgender refugees who were forced to flee their homes in states where hostile legislation and even physical violence has made life for them there untenable. As much as I pay attention to transgender issues, and even though I am now a transgender refugee myself, I somehow missed how big a problem this is. A survey recently conducted by the Movement Advancement Project, the link, as always, will be in the episode notes, showed that over 400,000 transgender people have become refugees for those reasons in the last year alone. To call this unprecedented is massive understatement. Last month in Kansas, around 1,700 transgender drivers had their licenses unilaterally revoked because at some point their gender marker had been changed to something other than that on their birth certificate. Legal action has already been taken in federal court, but for now, the legal identities of those 1,700 Kansas residents remains in limbo. So here we are, up to 29 states now that have one or more laws that take away the rights of trans people. Most notable, of course, are those laws that outlaw gender-affirming care for minors. But more than one state now has laws on their books that are intended to make it difficult, if not impossible, for adults to get that care. Yes, yesterday's victory in federal court, striking down RFK Jr.'s order threatening to withhold federal funds from doctors and hospitals providing such care, is a win, but we are far from being out of the woods. Over 600 anti-trans bills have been introduced in state legislatures this year. Idaho just passed a law making it a felony for a trans person to use a public restroom that matches their gender identity. Ironically, one observer noted that the penalty for peeing on the sidewalk in Idaho would be far less than for using the supposedly wrong restroom. If all of this seems like madness, let me assure you, fair listeners, that it is not. What looks like a bunch of fearful and ignorant lawmakers passing laws that are in direct contravention of virtually every professional standard of care when it comes to dealing with gender dysphoria is actually a bunch of shrewd political operators passing laws that are in direct contravention of virtually every professional standard of care when it comes to dealing with gender dysphoria. In previous episodes, we talked about how, in the wake of the Obergefell decision that legalized same-sex marriage, right-wing political strategists began casting about for a new boogeyman, something that they could point to as the next threat to our very way of life. What they landed on was, frankly, brilliant. They knew that most people, by far, did not know a single trans person. So they had a ready-made group that most people knew nothing about. They knew from past campaigns that ignorance and the fear that often accompanies it could be exploited easily, and the votes of those fearful and ignorant could be easily manipulated. But this new other included the magic ingredient: children. Now, think of the children has been a standard alarmist cry for Republicans for decades, and this time it dovetailed nicely with the transgender panic they were whipping up. I mean to tell you, it was a stroke of genius and a masterfully executed campaign of disinformation. Now let's look at some of the outrageous lies that they've been able to sell. Drag queens reading stories to children were grooming them to be transitioned, often without their parents' knowledge or approval. Children were going to school as one gender and coming home as another, having received gender confirmation surgery in the nurse's office, I guess. Kids were being encouraged to act on furry fantasies, even to the point of providing litter boxes for kids to do their business, and the ever-popular trope that gender identity is a mental illness. In my lifetime, I cannot recall a campaign of disinformation and fear-mongering that was anywhere near as successful as this. Even in the face of the overwhelming consensus of medical and psychological professionals, the Republicans have been able to sell this madness and pass dozens of laws that do nothing but cause needless suffering and, yes, even death. Studies are showing that even something as innocuous as "Don't Say Gay" bill can have a measurable effect on suicide rates in affected communities. The impact is all too real. People are dying, literally dying, because of a deeply cynical political stunt to win votes. And the mainstream media is missing in action on this story. I mean, how can this be? How can it be that politicians openly defy the wishes of parents, brazenly ignore the advice of doctors, and ban life-saving health care? And not even 60 Minutes picks up on this story. Remember, over 400,000 transgender refugees have been forced to flee this madness. When has anything like this, anything even remotely like this, ever happened in this country? The answer, of course, is that it never has. Not in this country. But something very similar has happened. Less than 100 years ago, it happened. And chillingly, it started with actions against the transgender community then as well. The very first target for Hitler's brown shirt thugs in 1930s Germany was the transgender community. That famous photo of those thugs standing around a bonfire and giving the Nazi salute? Yeah, the fuel for that fire was the library of Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Science. Hirschfeld had been conducting some of the most advanced research to date on gender identity, among other subjects related to sexuality and gender. Then, as now, it was trivially easy to frighten and motivate an already aggrieved population by blaming some strange, little understood other. So you're probably asking something like, what can we do? It's a reasonable question. And with the pace at which all this madness has taken place, it's easy to despair. The answer, however, is that there is plenty that you can do, that we must do. First of all, vote. Recent special elections around the country are showing us that the people are still in charge. Show the Republicans that they have made a grave mistake in all the ways they have insulted us and our Constitution. Help others vote. Make sure that everyone you know is registered and can get to the polls when they open. Give to the campaigns that are being waged against this Republican overreach. Volunteer for those campaigns. Phone banks, canvassing, what have you. Give to the ACLU and or Lambda Legal. You find links to both on the Trans Truth website. Give to organizations that are supporting the hundreds of thousands of transgender refugees. And we'll be talking more about those organizations in an upcoming episode. In other words, just get involved. One last, slightly self-serving note. Jerry Ann and I will be giving our Ambassadorship as Activism presentation at this year's Esprit Conference and Gala in May in Port Angeles, Washington. This will be an updated version of the same talk we have given to the Trans Community of New England's first event in Boston and at the Keystone Conference in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in years past. If you are a trans or gender nonconforming person, we will be showing you how important a role you can play in allaying the fear and ignorance that has been so obscenely exploited by the right. We look forward to seeing you there. You have been listening to Trans Truth, the podcast that speaks the truth about what it means to be transgender. We hope that you have found this episode to be informative and enlightening, whether you are transgender yourself, if you have a friend or loved one who is transgender, and especially if you are simply looking to understand more about the transgender experience.